Hi, everyone, and welcome to workshop number 5 at the EdCollab gathering, which I'm very excited for. If you're following along during this session, please use hashtag the EdCollab gathering space hashtag number 5. That way we'll be able to keep track of any of your tweets. And if you have questions or other ideas, I'll let our presenters know. So we are joined this afternoon live from a classroom. We're here with Diana and Rebecca, who have some incredible students with them. We have Nia, Sarah, and Atlas, who will be sharing their work and wisdom with you this afternoon. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Rebecca and Diana. Welcome.
Hey, Chris. Thank you so much for the opportunity today. We're really excited to present. And to everyone who is viewing, thank you for joining us. This is a topic that we're really passionate about and really excited to share. Today's topic is called Books, an Avenue for Change. And it's really about how a great book can change us, how it can teach us empathy, build community in our classrooms, all through social action projects. So again, my name is Diana Ferreira, presenting with Rebecca Jacopelli, and we have our 3 students here today.
Okay, so just a little bit about myself. I teach K-5 students, gifted students, and we both work in West Orange, New Jersey. I'm also the mom of 2. I have a kindergartner and a 15-month-old that keep me very busy and active. And I'm really passionate about letting students know that they have a voice and that their voice is a voice that can be used for positive change.
And I also teach in West Orange, New Jersey. I teach 5th grade ELA. I also have 2 children, one who is 5 and one who is 6. And I do most of this work for them. So today we're going to talk about a lot of different things, but there are 3 things that we wanted to start with. And that was the importance of nurturing responsive readers in our classrooms. And responsive readers are those who really feel the book in their heart. It's not just about making the connections that we talk about, but it's when they recognize that they've read a book that has changed them in some way, when they've connected with characters that they will remember for the rest of their lives. So that's what we're looking to do, is nurture those types of readers. We are going to be talking about the possibilities when we use books with an interdisciplinary approach in mind.
Right, and that we're just trying to show that reading does not only have to happen in reading class.
Right, that this is a lifetime skill and something that you should carry with you forever. And last, the value of using books to teach empathy, advocacy, and empower student voice.
So we're going to start by talking about what a social action project is. So a social action project is a project that's carried out by individuals or by groups. And it's important to note the one we're going to share today is about a group project, but as the teacher in the classroom, you can decide. It can be done individually, small group, or even whole class. And social action projects can be big or they can be small. There are no rules. So it's up to the individual student or how that social action project is going to play out. So what we want to talk about, to make a good social action project, you really need to have 3 things. You want to involve your community members, you want to educate and motivate others to take action with you, and you want to focus on the solutions. So we're going to talk about these 3 areas. Those involved need to learn about the issue. And Diana's going to really get into the inquiry process. We want to talk about the potential solutions to solve the problem. It goes beyond just volunteering. We're actually trying to make a difference by solving a problem and take action, create positive change on the issue. It's not just a service project.
Right, and this is empowering our students to take these lessons and transfer them. So these are transfer lessons that they'll take and use hopefully for the rest of their lives.
So we have some types of social action projects. So as a teacher, you can kind of maybe see some ideas on where you can take it. So one is educate. And to educate, you're simply maybe creating workshops, or your students are teaching their peers or younger students, or they're getting involved in the community. You're educating the community about your topic. You can advocate. So this can be done through your voice in social media. It can be done by letter writing, petitions. You're advocating for your social action. Unite, this is one of my favorites. You can have your students organize a school-wide event and bring awareness to your issue in that manner. Speak out is sharing your message and your research in a public service announcement, again, using social media. And when we think of this one, we think of Emma for Change, and how she rallied behind this gun violence and really made a difference. And when you think of those movements, you really hear that student voice. And then even the Me Too movement, that voice is being heard using social media in a positive way. And Engage, which simply means changing your behavior to then inspire others to do the same. And Serve, more than a volunteer. Again, maybe you're going to start your own social action, nonprofit business, and that can be even done at the high school level.
And to piggyback on what Rebecca said a bit, we have an opportunity as educators to model how to use social platforms. And it's our responsibility as educators to do this in our classrooms. So by using projects like this and introducing projects like this in our classroom, we're not only giving students voice, but we're also modeling how to properly use their voice for the good and for positive.
Yeah, digital citizenship is intertwined in this from start to end.
Absolutely. Another thing to just note about this slide is these are excellent verbs to use in our classroom. So it might be good to actually teach into what it means to educate, teach into what it means to advocate, and really down the entire lists before you even start your project, so that students truly understand what it means to unite and what it means to speak out. And then they can have a choice as to which of these actions they want to take for their own project. So moving on to the next slide. This slide is incredibly important. Without culture and a positive culture in your classroom, it would be almost impossible to facilitate this learning. So we look at culture as the umbrella of these 3 points of teaching empathy, teaching inquiry, and teaching advocacy. Mm-hmm. This culture needs to be a constant. It needs to start with us as educators. We need to constantly model what this culture looks like. We need to model what empathy looks like for our students, from us to them, and then also as a whole and as a community.
Right, and we want to make sure the classroom is a safe place for students. We want them to be comfortable in our classrooms. We want them to be open, willing to share, and willing to make mistakes. It's really important that we allow our students to make mistakes, because in a social action project, there's a lot of places where we may fail.
Right, and they have to be comfortable asking questions. And oftentimes with social action projects, the questions can be uncomfortable because they deal with topics that are difficult. So again, we need to create that culture in our classrooms to have a safe space for students to learn and to question.
Perfect. So when we're thinking of a social action project, it's multi-steps. So we provided just a framework for you. And this is something that just kind of keeps the purpose in mind and also keeps you focused. So first we need to learn about the issue and identify the problem. Then we're going to assess our community. We have to find out who in our community can help us. And this could be within our school. There may be teachers who are experts in certain areas, so we don't have to maybe look far, or it can be global and we can connect to someone across the globe. Then we have to choose our action project and implement it. Seems obvious, right? And then we evaluate and share our action plan. And sharing with an authentic audience is important. And that's really where the voice is going to come through. So we wanted just to note that. And this guide can be used K through 12. So if you're in kindergarten, a social action project could be mindset growth, or it can be something as simple as learning how to make friends. It doesn't have to be a large, big undertaking.
And to piggyback on what Rebecca said, it's important to encourage students to think big. So if your students come up with an idea that as an adult we know might be too big, let them go with it. Let them believe that they can do it. Let them learn into that. And then together through the process, figure out what a more appropriate or a more realistic project may be for today. Because just because they can't do a big project today does not mean that they can't do it tomorrow. And if we give them the opportunity today to do this work, our hope is that our kids now are the ones that are going to change the world in the future.
Right. They're going to carry it with them.
Absolutely. So we're going to share a case study now. This is a case study that I did with my 5th grade students, and our students that are here with us today were a part of this project. And I just want to say that going into this last year, I had no idea the impact that it was going to have on the students or myself as an educator.
And the community.
This changed me forever and changed what I hope my classroom will be forever. So the project was started after reading, Chris, would you mind moving to the next slide? Thank you. This project was started last year after we participated in the Global Read Aloud, which is a wonderful project that Pernille Ripp started. It's an opportunity for students all over the world to read the same book over a course of 6 weeks. And you're also able to collaborate with other classes, which is a wonderful experience and a great way to start these types of projects. The books that are usually chosen have wonderful themes. So again, they oftentimes lend themselves to these types of projects. So last year for the Global Read Aloud, we participated and read a book called A Long Walk to Water, which was written by Linda Sue Park. And it was our opportunity, or the first opportunity that we had, to see into a world that we knew nothing about. So by reading this book, we just organically started creating this culture of empathy through the literature.
Right, and we saw the students' faces, and they really had that aha moment while reading this book, and we knew there was something to it.
Something was happening. We also recognized that students were beginning to really inquire about this world, and we knew that this was a great opportunity to teach into this inquiry. So we did things such as view maps from Sudan and Ethiopia, which was an area where the characters had lived. We researched the Sudanese Civil War. We watched an interview with Linda Sue Park and Salva Dut. We watched TED Talks. We studied images, and we supplemented with other picture books. So this became a well-rounded digital and literature.
It was truly interdisciplinary.
It was interdisciplinary, absolutely. And it allowed us, again, to understand a world that we knew very little about. And the conversation that was starting to be had in the classroom was one that I could have never planned. It was organic, it was authentic, and it was powerful. Sorry. So we have Alice, who was one of our students here that was a part of the project.
And he's going to share a little bit about that aha moment.
So us as a 5th grade, together, wanted to know more about this issue because after finishing this book, we all just froze and said we had to do something. This book changed our views on life. I couldn't just put it back on a shelf like any other book that we read. In this book, the character Salva Dut went through challenges that I couldn't even imagine. He walked miles just to get water that wasn't even clean, and frankly, I thought that wasn't fair. This book has given us different perspectives on life and the challenges people face. We cannot just sit back and watch anymore. I find myself thinking on how I can help make a difference now and how this book has impacted our lives together.
Thank you, Atlas. As part of this inquiry process, another thing that we did was connect with other classes, which again was an opportunity that we had by participating in the Global Read Aloud. For this particular project, for this particular collaboration, we had connected with a class in Iowa, and that class had a gentleman by the name of Stephen Cambridge come and speak to them. He was a lost boy from Sudan who had a similar story to Salva Dut, who was a character in the book. And he too, like Salva, was working to do good for his home country of Ethiopia. So we were able to connect on a Google Hangout with this class in Iowa and listen to a story, or really an interview, and that allowed us an opportunity to connect in a way that we would not have been able to if we didn't make that connection with the classroom.
It's growing our community. So now our students are learning that this is not something we're just talking about. This is happening in Iowa, and it's happening all around.
Right, and there are a lot of people who are working towards a similar goal.
Yep. So just as a reference point, inquiry is an amazing piece of this project. And so when we think of an easy way to show this, we're going to use the launch cycle, which is our next slide. And the launch cycle came from the book Launch from AJ Giuliani and John Spencer. And it's just a simple visual that we kept in our classroom to kind of remind us where we are in this process and to also show the learning process as we're going. So really quickly, the first 4 steps on this chart are really the inquiry process. So first we need to look, listen, and learn. And that we just talked about, how we did that through images and videos. Then we asked tons of questions. The students had so many questions that we got to discuss, research, and that was a big piece of it. And then we have to really understand this problem, because we can't get solutions to a problem until we really understand it.
So when we're thinking about the learning that goes into this, again, going back to those 3 points, the learning, the solution, and the action, if students aren't able to fully comprehend what they're learning, they're not going to be able to move on to that solution part.
Correct.
So as educators, it allows us to check in and to know that they are in fact learning and comprehending the literature.
Right. And another really strong point here is that all of this can be done within our curriculum.
Yes.
We can still teach to the standards. There's lots of mini lessons happening around this process. And once we get through understanding the problem, now we have to really navigate our ideas. Is it possible? We have brainstorming sessions. And then it moves to the other half of the cycle, where now we're starting to create our project, our prototype. What is it going to look like? And then we have to highlight fix. We're constantly evaluating it. And then the best part is we get to launch it to an authentic audience. So this is just a really good visual to keep in your classroom.
Great resource. So moving on to the next slide, this goes back to the way that we collaborated and some important parts of a social action project. Remember, the idea of this is that we're working outside of our classroom walls, whether it be in the community, outside of the community, in the country, outside of the country. We want to model this collaboration. We want to model the connectedness that we have as a global community. And these are some platforms that help us do this in the classroom. One of them is Padlet. So this is an example of a Padlet that we had done during an interview with Stephen Cambridge that I had mentioned earlier. So this was wonderful because while we were connecting on a hangout with the class in Iowa, we were also connecting and collaborating with another school in our own district. And the students were really just taking notes about the hangout. But the beauty of this is, there were a couple, but one of them is that this turned out to be an excellent resource for us to use. We went back to this often to look at our notes, to look at the learning that we had done during this inquiry process while we were working on the social action project. So this is months of a project, and we went back to use this as a resource.
Right, and it's another way to get all students involved, right? So everyone had their fingerprints on this one piece. And if you're a student who isn't a strong reader or is English isn't your first language, this was a great resource because they're able to see others' ideas and piggyback off those ideas. And that's a really strong piece in the classroom.
Absolutely. Some other platforms that we used were Flipgrid, which again speaks to all learners. So sometimes if a student, say, is not as strong of a writer, but they are a strong reader and they're just not there yet, Flipgrid gives them a voice. They're able to verbally share their thinking rather than having to write it. So it takes that piece out for them and allows them to participate in the conversation. We also used Twitter, which was excellent, especially when Linda Sue Park very graciously tweeted us back in the classroom, which I know that she did for a lot of classrooms. But that, again, shows our kids that this is not just us, that we are in this together, that there are other people fighting the same fight with us.
And to piggyback on that, Twitter, we helped our classrooms come up with tweets. So what is the message we want to send? What is our purpose? And again, it's modeling how appropriately to use social media.
Yeah, that digital citizenship is just embedded right into all of these lessons. So moving on is the next piece of the social action, or the next step, I should say.
Right, and here's the real work, right?
This is the real work. This is the advocacy part. This is when we actually choose what we're going to do. So we've already, we're always in that inquiry process, but we've learned a lot about the topic. We're starting to see ourselves as experts. We've taught into those verbs, and now we pick what we're going to actually do. So we have Sarah, who's going to share how this, or what this looked like in our classroom.
So we saw this video of Richard Terreri and how he was our age and he took action to solve his problem. So we said to ourselves, well, if he can do something like this, then so can we. So we decided to write our book. And we wanted to write a book because it helped incorporate all of our ideas in the entire 5th grade. It built a community around all of us because we were writing the same story and we were writing for the same purpose.
Yeah, I couldn't say it better myself.
No, that's perfect.
And as an educator, I cannot, watching this unfold in my classroom was so powerful. Watching my students brainstorm ideas of how they can make a difference. And when I say watch, that's what I did. I stepped back and I let them figure it out. And I let them decide what they wanted to do. And I didn't know how big or small their idea was, but I knew that I was in it with them. And that whatever they were going to do, I get emotional because I was going to do it with them and figure it out.
Right. We just have to remember our students can do it, and we just need to believe in them.
Absolutely. And they can. When you see their work, my gosh, they can. It was incredible. So moving on to the next slide, this is some example of, again, how we were able to reach all learners using this social action project. So we had already studied, again, sticking with our curriculum, things that we were learning anyway. We had already studied narratives. We had studied character traits earlier in the year, but we were going back to practice that. And the beauty was that now that we had learned that in reading, we were now using those skills as writers. So we needed to develop our own characters, and we knew that characters have character traits. So we used the knowledge that we had on character traits to build our own characters. We also used the learning that we had done from reading and from the interviews that we had of Solitude and of Stephen Cambridge and Richard Terreri. So we were able to say, well, what do all of these people have in common? What traits do we see in all of these people? And we decided that our characters needed to be hopeful. They needed to be independent. They needed to be strong. And then from there, we started building. We also, as an interdisciplinary approach, I worked with the art teacher. And in art, the students studied African art. And then they created oils on canvas of African images. And again, we studied what illustrators did in the picture books. So the students went back into art and designed their own work there.
Right, and the students could pick their content, right? If you're the student who loves geography, you had your place. If you're the student who loves art, you found your place. Even the gifted learners in this book, in this project, were able to find their voice. They wrote the foreword to the book. They helped keep us organized and on task.
And they had a leadership role. They were able to take on a leadership role, which was authentic. It wasn't because I said, these are going to be the leaders in the group today. Right. It was authentic. They just were able to find their own voice and take leadership, and they did. The next step of the social action project is step 4. So this is the when we evaluate and share our plan. And this is an incredibly powerful part because, again, students are showing their learning, they're coming full circle, and they're really being able to share their voice with others. So we have Naya here today who's going to share this.
So when we were teaching other kids and sharing that, like telling them about the project, it made us feel really good inside to be able to let them know that they can be a part of this change and do something with us. We were just having so much fun, just like educating them, answering all their lovely comments and questions. It was just a really heartwarming experience, and it was just great. We really enjoyed all of it, and it really changed our lives.
Yeah, so originally we had thought that we were going to write, like Sarah had said, that we were going to write a book and publish it. And then after we realized how expensive it was to publish a book, we had to come back to the drawing board. And again, this was an incredible learning experience because we had to decide, well, how are we going to figure this problem out? We can't publish a book because our purpose, keeping our purpose in mind, was to raise awareness and also raise money for water wells in Sudan. Mm-hmm. So we needed to do this for a very minimal amount of money. And then we decided, well, why don't we make a wee video? We'll make a video so that we can share the video, and then we can teach other students in our school. And then hopefully they'll go home and they'll tell their parents. And again, it'll just raise more and more awareness.
And again, going back to those verbs, we educated and we advocated.
Yeah.
And that's what we did.
So moving on to the next slide, this was another really powerful moment in the classroom. So we had a speaker named Mike Duffy who came in, and Mike is a young man who traveled to Thailand and realized that in Thailand they too have no drinking water. So he came in and he shared his story with us. But the beautiful part was that we were then able to share our story with him. And he was, right guys? I mean, he was blown away. He couldn't get over the fact that 5th graders wrote this book and learned all these things. And, you know, he at one point said, it took me past college to travel to Thailand and recognize that this was an issue, and you guys are 10. As an educator, sitting back, I think that this was the first moment that our students saw themselves as part of this global community, that they too were making this difference and making this change, just like an adult would, that they can do the same thing.
So we can hear from them. Maybe they're like takeaways from it.
When we finished the book, and all of the stuff that we did, and when it was over, we all were like, what's next, and we were so sad that it was done. But when we were done, we had to realize that it was time for us to make a change by ourselves and take what we learned and put it into the real world.
If you guys have advice, or if you have something that you want to say to other teachers, like all the teachers out here that want to hear your voice, what would you tell them?
I'd say that students can do it, because this book that we wrote, it was our own words and our own ideas. Like Miss Ferreira just typed it up and gave us suggestions, but all of the ideas, all of the concepts, all the characters were ours and ours only.
And how did you feel?
Well, I know we all worked very hard, and it was just great to know that we did something that was like totally so out of the range of like what we would do. It's just like makes us feel really good inside to know that we changed so many lives and inspired others and filled hearts.
And in the end, what did we raised money for 3?
We raised money for 3 wells in Sudan, which 300 people were able to use.
About 300 people.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
So that just told us that the teachers all around, the kids are the future, so you guys could let them, give them ideas and inspire them, and let them be part of this.
It's funny because we've been having this conversation, I've been having this conversation with colleagues, and you know, how do we measure empathy? How do we measure compassion? How do we measure this type of work that's happening in our classrooms? It's difficult because unfortunately, we're oftentimes as educators looking at the data, we're looking at the numbers. But when you hear students sharing their learning and you hear conversation and the ideas that they're sharing with us, I don't think that there's any denying that these kids learned, that they grew
100%.
more than we could have ever maybe done without it. So I think that while sometimes we can't measure it, it's so important to do this work in our classrooms. We're still teaching the curriculum. We're still doing what we need to do as educators, but we're putting it to good.
Right, and we're putting it to them.
To the students.
It's their project.
It's their project.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to always be there. We have them for a year, you know, unless we loop. But for the most part, we have these kids for a year. So what can we do for them while they're in our classrooms for that 1 year?
How can we empower them?
How can we empower them? So moving on to the next slide. These are kind of just tips that I think that we realized after we came out of it, because again, when we started this project, we really didn't know the impact that it was going to have. So a few things to keep in mind. As the teacher, we want to continue to teach into the students' interests, so that to the students' passions and to their strong points. So again, going back to the interdisciplinary approach, if a student is great in social studies or geography, that's their leadership role. If they're great in art, find a place for them. If they're great with technology, we call them our tech experts, right? They can help us through, and my gosh, they help me all the time.
Right, we have to teach to their expertise.
Right, we have to teach into it. Again, just reminding that we're aligning this still to our standards. So this is just not something extra that we're doing. If we're reading nonfiction anyway, it's just a matter of finding a nonfiction article on this topic. We're still teaching the same skills. And to think about those teachable moments, it's not only academic, but it's emotional. When you see the community happening or when you see students starting to struggle, how can you teach into that?
Right, build that culture.
Build that culture, model that culture. And then also thinking outside of the box. So we talked about all content areas, but where can we include some word work into this, or vocabulary work, or the digital skills, again, those tech experts or digital citizenship. There are constantly teachable moments when we have this authentic learning happening. But as teachers, we have to just find them and teach into them.
Right, and then just for the students' point, we want to remember the purpose. We always kept going back to what is the purpose? Why are we doing this? And it helps us stay focused. It helps us stay organized on what we're learning and what we're doing at that moment. It's their project. So as teachers, we're really just taking a step back. We're facilitating, but we're not leading. It's definitely student-centered. And again, just what Diana had said, we're teaching to their expertise. If you have a student who loves learning about culture or language or technology, let them take the leadership role in that area.
And sometimes this is where they find their purpose. So a student who may struggle in school or may not have yet found their spot or their place in school, this is an opportunity for them to find their purpose and find their confidence. And I think once we find that confidence and we find that purpose, that's when we're able to take our steps forward.
I agree.
So moving on to the next slide, at the end of the day, our goal for our students is to become global citizens through literature. It's the idea that if students are able to recognize themselves as readers and use books to learn and to grow, they can make a change. There's a wonderful book called Disrupting Thinking by Kylene Beers and Robert Probst, and they give a really great model. It's thinking about what's in the book, what's in your head, and what's in your heart. As teachers, we so often teach what's in the book and what's in your head, right? So we're tracking our thinking and we're making inferences and using text evidence. But the what's in your heart component of this is so important. And the what's in your heart is what is going to make students responsive readers. It's what's going to make them global citizens. And I think at the end of the day, it's what is going to make them lifelong readers, because when you feel, you want.
Right. And when we think about that, it made Diana and I think about, what was that book for you, right? So we ask that you can tweet at us using the hashtag Avenue for Change in the EdCoLab Gathering 5 and tell us, what was that book for you? What was the book that really changed you or made you realize you need to do more, or you got that sense of empathy, right? And so when we were talking about it, I thought for myself, I can remember being in a classroom reading Number of the Stars. I remember thinking, why is this happening in the world? And it was something so beyond my comprehension at that time. And I realized that my life is a lot better than I realized. And that for me kind of sparked this interest. And that was my book.
My book, it's funny because my book, I don't think came until I was about a junior in high school. And I don't think I ever really saw myself as a reader as a student. I would read song lyrics and I would listen to music, and that's kind of where I used to do most of my reading when we had CD covers with lyrics in them. We used to have those. Yeah. But I think that the book for me was She's Come Undone by Wally Lamb. And I was a junior in high school, and I read it on my own because I wanted to read, because somewhere within me, I wanted to be a good reader. I wanted to see myself as a reader. My whole family, I grew up in a family of readers. And there's still one part in that book. It's a moment where the character is walking up a bus, walking down a bus aisle. And I still think about it. And it has always stayed with me. Yeah. So it's, again, kind of showing students and modeling that these moments happen. Do you guys have a book that you think, did you find your book yet?
Actually, there's this book called Dream on Amber, and it was really heartwarming because I could relate to it very well, and it really stuck out to me. So every time someone asks me what's my favorite book, I always say that one, because it really, I could read it over and over again. And I'm honestly not a reader, and that shows a lot if there's actually my favorite book.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to the heart. So when we're talking about and we're thinking about responsive readers as educators, I think we need to think about what teaching into those heartful moments.
Right, because we want them to be able to recognize their feelings while reading a book.
Absolutely.
Right. And then we kind of have this overview, right? Just to kind of, we're going to start wrapping it up. So Diana had this great quote that I'm going to read. It's not about the project, but how the project helps to reinforce the message, compassion, and awareness that a great book can bring. And I really feel like it sums it all up. We're here, we're teaching, we're using great literature we're studying the region, we're studying the art, but we're doing it to show students that there's compassion and empathy. And if we have compassion and empathy, it's going to open our doors.
Absolutely.
Right? And we reached all the learners, and we built that culture and community in our classrooms. We told them that their voice matters, and it's really important.
Yeah.
So what we thought would be, what we wanted to show was that, on the next slide here, that common themes in literature can align to, if not all themes can align to a social action project, but we just highlighted 4. So we highlighted friendship, overcoming the odds, individual versus society, and the loss of a loved one. And what we did is we just paired it with a text, and we did it from picture books all the way up through high school novels. And I think the one that stood out to us the most was friendship. I mean, and there's a myriad of books you can use for friendship, but the social action project was created by a 5th grade student, and he created the buddy bench. And so if you've never heard of the buddy bench, it's simply the idea that on the playground, sometimes students feel like they don't have friends and it's lonely. So this student thought, why not provide them a space? And so he invented the buddy bench. You sit on the bench, and that notifies students around you that I need someone to play with. And it's now grown national, it's global. I mean, in our district alone in West Orange, I know of at least 3 buddy benches. What a simple idea that had a huge impact.
Right. And this just proves that it can be done at any level, even with our little guys, even with our kinders.
Mm-hmm.
Give them a voice. What do they want? What do they, they want to be better in this world? And help them do it.
Right. And so on the bottom of this slide too, we said, tweet at us any book recommendations that you know of that would align really beautifully with a social action project. Maybe we can formulate a list and put it back out on Twitter later tonight. But there's so many great books out there, and what a great way to share it.
And also we can start connecting with each other. So our hope, which we'll talk about, but our hope is that if you're feeling inspired and this is the type of project that you want to do with your students, to share the type of book that you may do it with, to share some ideas. And then how great would it be if we can actually connect our classrooms and work on the same social action projects with other classes and just make them
build that community.
Build that community, yeah.
Okay, so we have some resources that we felt were a little invaluable in our classroom. And so one of them is Empatico. And Empatico is a site, it empowers teachers, it empowers students to essentially explore the world around you. And it unites us. So Empatico, it connects teachers. They provide free lessons. They provide videos. It's a really powerful site. So if you haven't heard of it, Empatico, all of these are hyperlinked. So I know the presentation's archived. You can click on them and explore them later. The Sustainable Development Goals are from the United Nations, and they provide us with 17 goals that essentially will change the world. And this is something that you can reference in your classroom all the time. We can go back to these sustainable goals. This is not our goal. This is the world's goal. And that helped us a lot throughout our project. Global problem solvers, what makes this a little different is that it's talking about that social entrepreneurship. This is maybe geared a little bit more towards the upper elementary and middle, but it's a different piece, and it's also free, and it has lots of videos and resources. And then the final one was a global read aloud. So Diana, I'm gonna let you take that one.
So again, just going back to what I had said in the beginning, the global read aloud is a wonderful project started by Pernille Rip. I have found, this is my 3rd year participating, and I have found that the teachers that you connect with are very like-minded.
Right.
So
that
motivation is there. We want to connect. It's okay if sometimes, our classrooms are a little messy when we're working through things, because that's, I think, sometimes that's our mindset, and that's where some of our best learning happens. So the connections are wonderful. The books, the themes are usually, from my experience so far, are incredible.
Right, and the themes are generally aligned to what is happening currently in our world.
Yeah.
And it's important to note that the global read aloud starts October 1st.
Starts October 1st.
So if you haven't decided yet, there are some really strong books this year.
Yeah, we're going to be reading Refugee, which is an incredible book.
It's worth joining.
It's absolutely worth joining if you haven't. It's not too late. And just check out the website. And if it's something that you want to do, please tweet us, let us know that you joined.
Yep.
And thank you to Pernille Rip for inspiring us and for starting this project, because we absolutely,
it's changed our classroom.
It has changed our classrooms.
Yep. So in closing, our wish is that students see books as an avenue for change. And whether it's just within themselves, within their community or their world, we really want them to learn that great literature has a huge impact on who you are and what you do.
Yeah, and our hope is that we've inspired teachers to allow students to advocate for their passions and to recognize their voice and to ultimately make a positive change in the world.
And in our closing remarks today at the Ed Collab, we have little Miss Flint, and what a perfect example of students can change.
Absolutely.
Students can do it.
Yeah. So we hope that you learned from us today, that you were inspired by us today, and we hope that you incorporate social action into your classrooms. We want to thank Diana DaCosta, who has given us as educators an avenue for change and a voice. And mostly we want to thank our incredible students for joining us today and for taking this ride with us. We're going to leave you with the book that we wrote. So we're going to share some of it. There'll be a live link to the entire book because it is 3 stories, so it's kind of long.
And it would be a really cool experience if you shared this with your class. It's a great example of social action and student voice.
Yeah, and if you do, please tweet us, let us know so that we can share it with our students. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So we'll be putting up well, I'll play the video right now if you all could mute your microphone on your side. Thank you. So I'll play this video for all of you, and then we'll make sure that this link goes out over the Ed Collab. So thank you all for joining our session. Right after this video, I'll just have a few announcements.
Written and illustrated by Mount Pleasant Elementary 5th graders in West Orange, New Jersey. The crisis in Sudan. All throughout Sudan, nature denies people the privilege of cool, clean water like we have here in America. Women and children like Imani and her mother have to walk miles to reach a pond, river, or other water source to provide for their families. Many organizations, such as the Iron Giraffe and Water Project, are helping to bring clean water to the people of Sudan. People around the country are raising money and starting projects and groups all to bring awareness to the crisis little by little. They, like us, are writing books, giving speeches, and raising money to help people who struggle with lack of water every day. Life for these people is hard, but with family and hope, they push through. These people show an extraordinary understanding of the fact that Kulawarga, family, is the most important thing. Salva and many others share their inspiring stories around the world. They help bring awareness to their struggles, helping all the people they can. We hope that the world can come together and try to make a difference in Sudan and other suffering countries. Dry as the Sun, Happy as the Day, written and illustrated by Miss Furr's 5th grade class. It is another day in the same, the moon ready to take his bed. The sun has barely opened his eyes. His rays just stretching over the horizon. Wake up, my darling. My mother's gentle voice calls to me. I plead for the sun to break for the day, our journey to water a great distance away. As I step outside of my ama, I know the day has begun, no matter what I tell the sun. My father in the fields, my brothers watching the cattle, mother and I will begin our walk of the day. Don't look so glum, my princess. My mom reminds me as she starts to sing our song. The melody and lyrics lift my spirit. The sun makes the sky dance with my mom's sweet voice in the background.
So this full video can be found online, and we'll make sure that we share that video link. We'll do that right after this session with all of you. So just another thanks to Rebecca, Diana, West Orange Schools, Nia, Sarah, Atlas. You all were amazing, incredible. The whole time I was thinking, if you are in a school or district that is thinking about inquiry and ways of infusing inquiry more, like I know Texas, many of you who are joining us today from Texas, it's a big part of your standards. I just thought this session from start to end was a practical, inspirational look at ways to do just that. So thank you to all of you. And for those of you that are staying with us as we move into the afternoon, here we go. Coming up in session 3's workshops, we have Assessment as Learning, Reading and Writing Workshop Essentials. That is workshop number 8. We have Falling in Love with EdTech for Littles for grades K to 2. That is workshop number 9. And we are all learners using an experiential model of professional learning to model effective collaboration and inquiry. That is for grades 9 through 12. and that workshop is number 10. And all of these begin in just a little less than 15 minutes. I also would like to remind you, if you have been inspired by today's sessions, I know I was really inspired by this one. If you've been inspired by today's sessions, please go to our charity tab and pay the joy forward to either one of our charities that we've adopted for today, or perhaps to another. And then lastly, if you'd like to enter to win a seat to our very first study series coming up in October, remember to please follow the Ed Collab on Instagram and use hashtag the Ed Collab Gathering in your post. So far, we've actually had several posts from around the world. Everyone is eligible to win one of those seats, so we hope you'll join us there. So thanks again to everyone here at West Orange Schools. You guys were awesome, yay! Yay! And thanks to all of you who are viewing online. Enjoy the rest of the Ed Collab Gathering, and thanks for all that you do.